we are horror, but we claim the American Gothic because we are wanting to dive into the darker parts of American society that are I don't feel like they're as overlooked anymore, but I think at a certain point in time we felt like we're looking under the rocks.
Yeah, also we're doing political. I guess
we are doing
all horror is political, I guess, but like
there's some, even if we're the only ones who can see it, there's some social commentary.
Yeah, it's all critique of American culture.
Yes.
That's why the Canadians love it so much.
I liked in Unrepentant Necrophile how it was actually, and correct me, I felt like it was a feminist statement that you were trying to say, like, yeah, this is creepy and obscene, but also how many times do men use women's bodies against their will, even, alive and dead, and this is a woman kind of, for better and much worse, taking that back. And I mean, correct me if I'm saying it wrong.
No, I think you're totally right. I think the part that I think is horrific about her story is that she's actually a misogynist. She's taking the power back, like, for herself, but it's still a very individualistic pursuit, it's just for her, and she's not figuring anyone else in. And I think when I think of feminism, and like the matriarchy and why it's so beautiful, it's because it is focused on care and taking, so I think, and taking care of everybody and where they're coming from. And she does take care of the body, but it's,
I mean, I think this touches on why we chose this subject,
yes,
is because we can explore all these issues in a way that isn't didactic,
Yeah.
As we create this strange space, we can have these, conflicting, because it's kind of like, there's a number of like meta-theatrical layers happening of like, because I think you're completely right, as it does read as like kind of an anti-hero feminist anthem in many ways, and like we constructed it, designed around there, but also because we kept it pretty oblique. It's been interesting, like, since I was editing all the footage through the pandemic, and so my layer of storytelling as the editor and like the director of the actual images took on this very like individualism focus. Like all of a sudden Karen's journey, or Lee's journey, became this almost metaphor for like just this very American desire of like, I don't care if this is bad or good, I'm gonna do this because I want to do it now, and like I'm not thinking about the consequences, because best case scenario, I get what I want in the end, and I'm in the middle of the woods with two corpses with no plan to get them back or plan to return to society. But it doesn't matter. It's like just barrel forward. So like, it took on like all these different echoes in today's context as well. And it's like
the death cult.
Yeah, and just the death. We always joked about the this was our death cult
Yeah.
show of like,
and she's the and she's the like the goddess, and the like and this is the altar of capitalism on which all bodies are sacrificed. Yeah. And for her, like it's for her unending unsated desire. Yeah. It's a weird show, but we love it because there's just so much going on. Yeah.
kind of got a motor of like, it asks the question of like, what's worse a lot of like, we introduced this character at the beginning of John Reese, who is just, churned into the war machine and spit out basically. And like, what's worse? Is that worse, or is it the fact that she is going to steal his body, basically? And it's like, okay, she's on top, she's performing sex acts on his body, but somehow it's creepy that my character comes in and is watching, like, of like all these layers of like, why is okay? And now it's like Steve also wants in with the body, and it's like, yeah, of just all these questions of like, why is
a woman as the perpetrator somehow sexy or less threatening than a man as the perpetrator,
Yeah, it's fun. Steve, poor Steve. Steve's got a lot of issues. Because we created that thing in 2015 too, and so like Steve, the incel movement was like just kind of bubble up, and
I just saw that the Santa Barbara shooting, where I think he shot like 11 or 14 people. That was in 2014, and that was like heavily on our minds.
Yeah, and I had been researching for another show about conspiracy theories, so it was like deep in the disturbing parts of the internet. But it's interesting, like the 4 years that have passed since, it's like that whole, the incel movement has like grown, expanded, and been swallowed up into the general alt-right movement, and like, so it's all, Steve has become has embodied many toxic thought patterns, and it's been interesting to perform.
Yeah, but that reminds me, just talking about, experimenting with theater, you guys use a devising process. Can you explain what that is, how that works, and kind of how you go through that?
Yeah, so devising is kind of it's kind of a catch-all term that's pretty nebulous in definition, that is kind of at least my understanding of it, and the history of it is probably much greater than I know. But our perspective of it comes from, I guess, a school in Paris called, it's founded by Jacques Lecoq, was the Lecoq School in Paris, and then that was founded in the 60s and has had a number of offshoots, and our connection to that is just who we've worked with, basically. Like early on in my career as a playwright, I started working with physical theater groups that were creating their own work, but were not doing it in a traditional theatrical structure where you have you have your playwright who writes everything down, you have your director who stages it, and then you have the actors who go where they're told and say what you wrote for them, basically. But rather a much more integrated, kind of almost improvisational creative style, where it's more akin to a jazz quartet, like improvising together versus playing or maybe, you know, improvising with in the structure of within the framework of a song. So from working with groups that were using this type of methodology, I kind of started to work out my own idea of like how one is, you know, communicates ideas in an ensemble, essentially. You know, like when you, because the group I was working with didn't have a director at all. It was like 5 even voices in a room. So then a huge part of the creative process becomes delegation of ideas and, you know, creating factions to support ideas, and like it becomes almost a, you know, you're navigating through personalities in order to get your ideas to the top of a collaboration, or not even your ideas, to just get the best ideas to the top of the collaboration. And you're also kind of staging a play backwards in that we are, when we create, we're building the image as we write the piece, and the image informs the narrative, and the narrative informs the image, and it's all kind of done simultaneously versus like finishing the narrative in one pass and then staging and then refining. Like,
yeah, I think the beauty of ensemble devised work and why it's different than the traditional model, I think one of the beauties is that it's completely collaborative. You have to reach consensus amongst parties, and the best ideas really are going to make it through, even if they're not your own personal ideas. I think when you go into there's an element of competitiveness just because you want it to be the best, you know? But you know that only by getting rid of your ego and communicating really effectively, that's how the best ideas are actually going to make it through.
So yeah, one of the things we love when we hear about collaboration, and correct us if we get any of this wrong, please, is that it's sort of like too many cooks in the kitchen, but it works out. It's like you need that many cooks because somebody only knows part of the recipe and somebody only knows a little bit of the other part of the recipe, and you only get a good dish, I guess, when you all work together.
Yeah, I mean, it can be depending on, I think a huge part, I think a huge part of why we why our ensemble is so small, we have a shorthand, and our skills complement one another. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to say that all ensemble devised experiences have been like, I was really happy with the show that came out.
and no, it's interesting because I've been working in this form, like really formally, for about 10 years, I guess now, since I was 26, and probably, you know, in a more, you know, kind of like informal scraping that at these ideas of collaboration for like 5 years before that. But the one thing that I've learned that's the constant with the devised ensemble is that you're always kind of preparing for the last war, if that makes sense, of like the last devised process did not go well. Like, they're interesting because like usually the good ones, right when they premiere, everyone involved is a little bit upset about it. That's the mark of a good collaboration. Like everyone's kind of like everyone's had to fight for ideas. Everyone's had to like compromise about ideas, and everyone's just like really only hanging on to like vague faith that they had in the group, 6 weeks ago when we started working together before we went through this, very taxing process. But then you do the show and like you're upset about the show because you know what's not there, but then the audience sees it and the audience doesn't know what's not there. So they just take it at very face value, and they actually get like, I've noticed that they like audiences really, they can sense the tension in the room that wrought the piece, if that makes sense. Like they can sense all that, that hours and hours of like just fighting and arguing and laughing and they can sense all that tension. Like that tension gives the piece a uniqueness that is hard to engineer through any other process. Like if there were an easier way to create work like this than just locking yourself in the room for 70 hours with a group of people, you would do that. Like if one person could sit down and do it, they totally would. But it's not, it taps into too many, it taps too much into the unconscious, I think, to do that for, unless someone's really, really good, I guess that person exists. But
that being said, wouldn't you say that we have been a part of ensemble devised pieces where it's given us a lot of perspective about how we do and do not want to communicate, and so it's made it the process I think gentler, easier for us, perhaps.
No, you're still one of the difficult collaborators that I've worked with. You have given me tools to take forth into the world, I think. And that's why, like,
he's
our
teaching me diplomacy.
Well, our collaboration is like, we also, our romantic relationship usually goes a little bit on pause during the, just because we're working together so intensely. It's kind of like the room arguing for 12 hours. It's like we want to go to our corners afterwards. We also don't give we don't always give ourselves a lot of time.
Hey guys, if you like what we just did, there's going to be plenty more coming up. Please like, comment, subscribe. Our Venmo is in the description. Please support us if you can. Our cats need the money.